The long night. William's battle with darkness. William sat in the creaky wooden rocking chair next to the window, the cool night breeze carrying the subtle hum of crickets outside. At 78 years old, he felt like his body was betraying him, piece by piece, as if the very foundation of his health was slowly crumbling into dust. Diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 20 years ago, William had spent the latter part of his life trying to navigate a world of blood sugar monitors, countless pills, and insulin injections. But at night, that's when his woes loomed largest. It was another sleepless night for him, one of hundreds, perhaps thousands, that he'd endured over the years. The digital clock on his bedside table blinked 3 o'clock a.m. in bright red, glaring like the sun against the darkness of his bedroom. His nights were punctuated with sweat-drenched sheets, heart palpitations, aching limbs, and the gnawing sensation of being utterly trapped in his failing body. Night sweats and restlessness. William's shirt was damp, clinging to his hunched shoulders as beads of sweat dripped down his face. "Not again," he muttered under his breath, wiping his forehead with the sleeve of his pajama top. Night sweats had become a regular companion. It felt as though his body had turned against him, staging a rebellion with every drop of perspiration. He knew what was to blame: hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. His doctor had explained to him that when his blood sugar dipped too low in the middle of the night, adrenaline would flood his system, jolting him awake and leaving him drenched. His solution used to be simple: check his blood sugar before bed. But even now, with decades of experience managing his diabetes, William's glucose monitor often delivered unpleasant surprises. One evening, his blood sugar levels would seem stable, only to plummet unnervingly low hours after he'd fallen asleep. Another evening, driven by memories of too many hypoglycemic episodes, he'd overcompensate by snacking before bed, only to discover his blood sugar was too high when he woke in the morning. Unable to fall back asleep, William shuffled to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. He poured himself a small glass of orange juice, just enough to stabilize his blood sugar if it had dropped too far. Clutching the glass in his wrinkled hand, he stared through the window at the moonlit sky. "It's almost funny," he mused aloud, "how something as small as a few drops of sugar can make or break a man's peace." The pain in his legs. Returning to his bedroom, William lowered himself into bed gingerly. His legs were restless, as though some unseen force was compelling him to move them. He rubbed his calves, attempting to quell the nagging sensation surging through his nerves. Restless leg syndrome, RLS, that's what the doctors called it. Apparently, his diabetes had damaged the nerves in his legs over the years, and now they buzzed with an unbearable mixture of tingling, numbness, and an incessant need to move. On nights when the RLS didn't plague him, there would still be no reprieve. Instead, William would wake screaming in agony as his muscles tightened involuntarily, twisting his calves into knots. Leg cramps were another hallmark of his diabetic life. His doctor had explained that these cramps were likely due to electrolyte imbalances: potassium, magnesium, calcium, the familiar script of things his body either lacked or couldn't use properly. Earlier in life, he had dealt with leg cramps by stretching diligently or incorporating more bananas and nuts into his diet. But for William, those days felt decades behind him. So much had changed since Martha passed away. His wife of nearly 50 years had always been the careful one. She used to research meal plans, book his doctor appointments, and remind him to take his medications. Without her calm, steady presence, William felt that managing his health was like trying to navigate a sinking ship. Sleep apnea, a ghost in the night. And then there was that other thing, sleep apnea. Somewhere along the way, William's son had persuaded him to visit a specialist after years of nighttime gasping for air. He hadn't believed the notion at first. What did interrupted breathing have to do with diabetes? But as his son often reminded him, diabetes rarely traveled alone. It opened the door for a host of other unwelcome guests: high blood pressure, nerve damage, and, in his case, obstructive sleep apnea. The continuous positive airway pressure CPAP machine on his nightstand seemed to mock him. He couldn't stand the claustrophobic sensation of wearing the mask as he slept, so most nights the machine went unused. William knew this was dangerous. He had read studies that linked sleep apnea to heart conditions, insulin resistance, and a worsening of diabetic symptoms. But no matter how much his children scolded him, He couldn't bring himself to wear it for more than an hour or two. Frequent bathroom trips. His thoughts were interrupted by an all-too-familiar sensation. Sighing heavily, William swung his legs over the edge of the bed and made his way to the bathroom. At this point, nocturia, frequent nighttime urination, felt as routine as brushing his teeth. With his diabetes poorly controlled, his blood sugar levels often climbed higher than they should, and his kidneys worked overtime to remove the excess glucose from his bloodstream. These frequent bathroom trips weren't just an inconvenience, they were a hazard. His body, frail and unsteady, didn't recover from falls the way it used to. A few months back, he had slipped on his way to the toilet in the dark of night, cracking his hip on the bathroom tiles. He was still healing from the fall, both physically and mentally. Now, he made sure to sleep with a flashlight on his nightstand, though even the faint yellow glow couldn't dispel the sense of dread lurking in his chest. The emotional toll. As the hours ticked by, William lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts swirled like autumn leaves in a gust of wind. He thought about the burning sensations in his feet, the nerve pain that never seemed to ease. He thought about the vivid nightmares that sometimes jolted him awake, or the pounding headaches that greeted him on mornings when his sleep was especially poor. But what hurt most was the loneliness. When Martha was alive, William could imagine that his struggles weren't his alone to bear. She would hold his hand during the darkest nights, her presence a balm to his troubled mind. Now, with nothing but the silence of his empty house and the faint whir of the heater to keep him company, the darkness seemed endless. Diabetes wasn't just robbing him of his health. It was slowly stealing his dignity. The morning light. At long last, dawn broke, spilling light across William's bedroom floor. For a moment, he simply lay there, letting the sunlight warm his face. He could hear the chirping of sparrows outside his window and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. It was in these quiet moments that William remembered why he fought so hard to keep going. He fought for the rare mornings spent with his grandchildren, their laughter filling the room like music. He fought for the chance to sit on his front porch, cup of coffee in hand, watching the changing seasons. Though nights like the one he had just endured were grueling, William understood that they were part of his journey. Diabetes may have thrown him into a perpetual battle with his own body, but every new dawn reminded him that he was still here, still fighting, still finding reasons to live. He sat up in bed, reached for his glucose monitor, and pricked his finger. The device beeped, displaying his blood sugar reading. Not great, but not terrible, he muttered to himself. Slowly, with effort, William began his morning routine. The night had been long and unforgiving, but the day ahead offered a glimmer of hope, and for William, that was enough.